xerrarem no amb una i dues, sinó m'atreviria a dir jo, amb 3 dones, afegirem 3 noms en aquestes converses, en aquestes màtries. Són, en primer lloc, l'escriptora Elin Cullhed. Elin, benvinguda. Aquí. També ens acompanya la Maria Sempere, de l'editorial Les Hores. Maria, gràcies per ser aquí. I deia jo que serien 3 perquè Sílvia Plath, efectivament, és un dels noms que afegim avui, el tercer nom que afegirem en aquesta màtria que construïm. En tot cas, abans de parlar de Sílvia Plath i de l'obra Eufòria d'en Elin, el que volem fer és, com sempre, començar amb la mateixa pregunta, traslladar un mateix interrogant a totes les dones que passen per aquí, perquè entre totes construïm aquest concepte de màtria, que és neologisme, perquè el puguem definir en acabar el cicle entre totes. Vos demanam, per obrir la conversa, abans d'entrar en els detalls del llibre, que vosaltres dues, Elin i Maria, ens expliqueu què vos ve al cap, què significa per vosaltres aquest concepte de màtria. No sé qui vol començar.
Yeah, so I really wanted to write about Sylvia Plath as this kind of powerful woman. And actually, I had some kind of breakthrough in my writing when I was in Cognac, in France. Just some months, maybe 1 month before I started writing Eufòria. And there I was reading a little text, a little like, not an essay, not a biography, it's like a mix of these two, by the French writer Maria Sempere. I'm sure some of you know her. And she had written a beautiful book about the artist Paula Modersohn-Becker. She's one of the earliest expressionists in painting, history of painting. And she was married to another painter, Otto Modersohn. They were German. And when Marie Dariussec is going to sort of write this text about her, she goes to the museum in Germany, and she has to go down in the basement to see her art, because her art is covered in dust. And I think that's a very good picture of sort of history of female artists and painters and writers and their legacy, because it's very often forgotten and sort of put down in the basement, you know, through history. And her paintings were all about the female experience and the female body. And she painted like pregnant women. She painted women breastfeeding. She painted like beyond the dichotomy of like Madonna or horror. She just like painted everyday women in their own sort of space, like very daily life sort of, and through this sort of female subjective view. And what happened with this painter was that she died only 31 years old because she gave birth, and she was said to lie down. So she did. And the first thing that happened when she stood up 18 days later was that she fell and she died immediately. Because you're not supposed to lie down when you just have given birth, you know. So she died. And what happened to me in Cognac while reading this book, because I was in Cognac with my husband, who was this scholarship writer. And we had 3 small kids. And what happened to me was like, I understood that to be sort of, as a powerful artist, as a powerful woman, as a powerful female artist, you can just be locked down in the basement, and you can even die because you give birth, and your life is full of conditions that men doesn't have. And what happens to your art, your very powerful, strong art, when it just is erased from history, sort of. So I felt on a personal level that I can't let this happen, because I felt really that my husband was at the center all the time, because he was the writer and I was the wife of the writer all the time. So I felt like history breathing at me, and I didn't want this to happen once again. So when I got home from Cognac, I just started writing Eufòria.
Doncs per intentar contribuir una mica a la definició de Màtries, jo us explicaré una mica l'experiència des d'aleshores, des de l'editorial. El Manel és l'altre col·lega d'aleshores i jo vam decidir posar-nos fa 7 anys en l'editorial aleshores i aleshores, des del primer moment, no vam pensar si publicaríem dones o homes. Nosaltres vam pensar que publicaríem un tipus de narrativa. I el tipus de narrativa que volíem publicar és la narrativa al final que parla o aprofundeix el que seria la naturalesa humana, relacions humanes, l'amor, la mort, què fem aquí, les grans preguntes que s'ha fet sempre tota la humanitat. I aleshores en aquest camí, en aquesta cerca de voler posicionar o crear una editorial en aquest àmbit, vam començar a publicar. La primera publicació va ser una dona, la segona va ser un home i després van venir un munt de dona. Tot de manera que hem arribat a 44 títols i potser jo calcularia que n'hi ha com a 6 que són homes i la resta són dones. Però sí que en tot aquest camí, en aquests 6 anys, ens hem adonat que ens feien aquesta pregunta, no? Per una banda, que vosaltres publiqueu, sou una editorial per dones? I jo penso, com? O sigui, publiqueu coses de dones, no? Però aquestes preguntes a molts nivells, a nivell de periodistes, a nivell de clubs de lectura, i aleshores vosaltres expliquem, nosaltres publiquem bona narrativa. I un tipus de narrativa, un tipus de narrativa, que segurament ens podem referir a aquest Màtries, que és una narrativa amb una certa sensibilitat, pensant en les emocions, inclusiva, però evidentment poden escriure, òbviament, sobre aquests temes homes. Tradicionalment, la narrativa, és el que diem, la narrativa comú, és la narrativa dels homes, com comentava l'Elin, la maternitat, la menopàusia, tenir fills, sempre s'han considerat temes menors, som la meitat de la població. Per què aquests són de dones i els temes dels homes, no sé, clàssicament dels homes, perquè tampoc n'hi ha, de la guerra, de, no sé, la lluita, la caça, això són temes universals. Per què fàcilment, i això ho podeu preguntar als vostres amics, nosaltres ens és indistint identificar-te amb un protagonista home o un protagonista dona. Des de l'experiència com a venedora, quan fem de venedors aleshores, hi ha homes reticents a comprar personatges dones. És com si aquesta distància d'identificació costés més. Per sort això està evidentment evolucionant. Però aquestes són com les dues grans revelacions una mica que en Manel i jo hem tingut en aquest sentit. O sigui que, per una banda, aquesta pregunta. Escriviu literatura femenina, què és literatura femenina? Dic jo. A més, penso que la pregunta és exclusiva i és ofensiva també pels homes, perquè què passa? Que els homes no poden tenir emocions i sensibilitats, i aleshores aquesta és una de les grans preguntes, i aleshores, fruit de tot això, estem contents del nostre catàleg, sí que majoritàriament són dones, fruit del tipus de narrativa i la qualitat de la narrativa que volem publicar, però també sí, ens n'alegrem que siguin dones. Fantàstic. Molt bé, doncs ja hem fet aquesta entradeta, si voleu. Us introdueixo una mica l'Elin. L'Elin és una escriptora sueca, té 40 anys. Actualment ella va escriure una primera novel·la que es deia Debuts, l'any 2016, i vam haver d'esperar 5 anys perquè publiqués aquest llibre que avui presentem i comentem, que es diu Eufòria. Amb aquest llibre, que va publicar l'any 2021, directament va guanyar l'August Prize, que és el premi més important de les lletres sueques, i també va ser finalista del Mèdicis en la categoria de traducció i també de l'Estrella Prize europeu. Ara li preguntava quan veníem aquí, perquè quan ho vam publicar nosaltres aquest llibre fa 3 anys s'havia traduït a menys llengües encara, però ara actualment m'ha confirmat que s'ha traduït a 26 llengües. Això penseu que és una gran fita per una autora sueca desconeguda, o sigui, fins ara pràcticament, no vull desmereixer el seu primer títol, però l'impacte o la transcendència d'aquest segon realment és impressionant. Aquesta novel·la, què ens explica? El que fa l'Elin, que ara us explicaré ja més detalladament, és explicar-nos l'últim any de vida de Sílvia Plath. Sílvia Plath, com sabeu tots, és una poetessa molt coneguda, malauradament, erròniament, arran de la seva mort, o sigui, la seva mort dramàtica amb 30 anys és el que la va donar a conèixer, i el que fa l'Elin Cullhed, fruit que el seu marit va cremar principalment els diaris de l'últim any de la seva vida, és fer una ficció d'aquest últim any. Però jo li vull preguntar a ella perquè us expliqui. I en primer lloc li preguntarem si ens pot resumir una mica qui va ser Sílvia Plath, una mica més extensament en l'àmbit literari, perquè els lectors, si encara no l'heu llegit, tingueu interès en llegir-la i la ubiqueu una mica en l'àmbit de la poesia i la narrativa.
Okay, so Sylvia Plath, she was born in 1932 in Boston, in America. Sorry. And she had a father who was a professor in biology, and he was also a writer. He had written about the bumblebee. And her mother was his secretary. That's how they met. And they were of German, her father was German and her mother of Austrian descent. And she also had a little brother, Warren. And she, from a very early age, she knew she wanted to write. And her mother also encouraged her, because I know that her mother also had literary sort of ambitions. And literature and culture was really important to this family. I mean, they were academics. And her father died when she was 8. And this was really a shock to the family. And it was kind of a disaster, really, when he died, because he was ill and he didn't want to go to the doctor. And I think that was kind of a turning point in Sylvia Plath's life, of course, because she was sort of not able to be with him when he was sick. He had diabetes, but he wasn't aware. He thought he was sort of self-diagnosed and thought he had lung cancer. But it was like the illness of diabetes, and I mean, if this is not cured, it can be very severe, you know. So what happens was that he bumped with his foot into a wall, and the foot became all blue, and he had to amputate. And while he was sort of on the top floor and being really in a bad condition, Sylvia Plath, she wasn't allowed to see him if she didn't perform to him. So I think this was maybe when she started sort of like, yeah, she knew that she was sort of loved when she was a performer. You know, she performed to her dying father. And at this time, she's also publishing her first poem in a newspaper in Boston. So she was really young to be published. And then he dies, and she's not able to go to the funeral. So it was sort of, because of her mother. Her mother forbid them to go to the funeral and to mourn this death of her father. So I think like the fear of weakness, sort of, like the perfectionism, the fear of weakness. I think it was all planted there, and sort of the avoidance of darkness was a bit planted there, because everything that you need to avoid, you know, it grows. So if you need to like cut off darkness or grief or fragility or vulnerability in your life, these things maybe tend to grow. And they did in the life of Sylvia Plath. Yeah. So that's her start. There's more to come. But and I do think that Sylvia Plath also feared, one of her worst fears, I think, was to become a single mother, as her own mother now became. You know, so she had that fear really inside of her, because she witnessed sort of how her mother was sort of forced into, relative poverty. I mean, she didn't have any money because the father, Otto, he didn't have an insurance. Mm-hmm. So they didn't have so much money, and I think that things were projected on Sylvia Plath that she should be the success. She should sort of be this really to make all that she could of her talents. And she went to college, and she was winning some prizes, some literary prizes for her texts, and she was really, really busy in her teens, really, really busy. And I think she was sort of exhausting herself already, really. being that young. Because in the end, what happens when she was about to turn 20 in the summer of 1953, she makes a suicide attempt when she's coming home from a scholarship that she got from the newspaper Mademoiselle in New York. She was in New York for some weeks with a bunch of ladies in her own age, and they were all like guest editors at Mademoiselle. And she had never been to New York. That was the first time, and she was sort of, she was confronted with this scene, and it was all, for her who had such literary ambitions, it was all very superficial, she thought, and everything was about to be the most beautiful girl and to wear lipstick and to have the right clothes, and it was some kind of like education how to be the perfect woman, you know, in this period of time. And when she comes home from this experience in New York, she has a letter that she's not accepted to a writing school that she really wants to go to. And that makes her really, really depressed. And I'm sure people that have read The Bell Jar knows what I'm talking about, because she has been writing about this in The Bell Jar. This is sort of the plot in The Bell Jar, which is a really like autobiographical novel. But that is one novel that she writes in 1961, so it's later. And she has this really cruel suicide attempt where she swallows sleeping pills, and she writes a note that she has gone out for a walk, and she leaves the note in her mother's house, and then she hides in the basement. So she's not out on a walk, but everyone thinks she is because they find this note. But she's very, very close. She's very, very nearby all the time. But people think that she is out. And they start to search for her. They search and search and search. And the search goes on for 3 days. And I think this is another crucial moment in the life of Sylvia Plath. And this is something that I really, on a deep, deep level, understood from my research work, that she actually had experienced what it was like to die. And this may sound a little crazy, but the thing is that what happened when she was away was that she became headlines in the newspapers, because she was gone missing, and no one knew where she was, and this was news that sort of it was headlines in some of the biggest newspapers all around. So, and I think that for a writer, this must have been like made a deep sort of impact on her self-esteem as an artist, because she knew she had wanted to become a great writer from a very young age. And then she makes a suicide attempt, and that creates headlines. Not her own art, not her own voice, not her own poetry, not her own texts create these headlines, but her sort of possible dying does. So she knew, I think that she really knew that a dead woman could make headlines, you know. And that this is really a tragic note, and this is, I think, one of the tragic insights that she really had, and that she knew that this was a condition to live with as a female writer. I could just add that she's also then being cured at the mental hospital in the United States, where she is under a treatment of electric shocks. And I mean, electric shocks in the early 50s was a bit brutal, I think, and she didn't have anesthesia. It was just straight on the shocks. And this was really, and she's also been writing about this, and really, this is a great deal of the plot in The Bell Jar too. what this was like for the character Esther Greenwood in the Belgian. But after some years at the Smith College, she has a Fulbright scholarship to go to Cambridge in England. Yes, and she does, and quite straight away she meets the poet Ted Hughes, or the poet to be Ted Hughes. And they fall in love. They meet in 1956 in February, and they are having a release party for a literary magazine that Hughes and some of his buddies are creating. And then they fall in love, and Sylvia Plath has written about this because she's writing her journals, her really, really strong and powerful journals. And she's been describing, and also in a letter, I think, to her mom, she's describing this meeting with Ted Hughes in a very, very good way. It's one of her best letters. And even in this first letter, just a few days after she meets Ted Hughes, she's describing him as like he's so strong and powerful that he makes all others into pure fragments. Really, she's describing him so that he's really powerful, and he's really sort of, in a violent way, sort of that he has a voice like the thunder of God. She's really putting him on a pedestal, really. And yeah, and they get married just a few months after this, in June. And then their history takes the start. And where we meet her in my novel is at the really end of her life, because from 1956. And in her marriage to Ted Hughes, they are sort of trying to be writers, both of them. And they moved to Boston, and Boston is not a good place for Hughes. He's so British, he really wants to stay in England. And and then they live in London when their first daughter is born, Frida. And then when she is just 1.5, sort of, they decide to move to the countryside. So in 1961 they moved to the countryside, and this is when she just has written the Belgian. They moved to this grand house in Devon, in southern England, and this is really the dream that Ted Hughes has. He's really growing this dream that they are going to live in the countryside and to like have this dream life, sort of, with children and animals, and to grow vegetables, and they're both going to have these literary careers. And somewhere there you can sort of sense that this is not going to end up well, you know. Yeah, so this is where we meet her. We meet her when she has given birth to her son, her second child, and she does it in this house. She gives birth in January 1962 to him. Yeah, so in the start of the novel, she's very, very pregnant.
On comença la novel·la és just quan acaben d'arribar a Devon i tenen el primer fill, i aleshores veurem com un any de vida de la Sylvia Plath. O sigui, veurem el següent any, i el que fa ella, després preguntarem per què, és no arribem a aquesta mort dramàtica de la Sylvia Plath, després ja aprofundirem, però sí que vivim aquest últim any. Aleshores, la meva primera pregunta, ja entrant en el que seria pròpiament la novel·la, i una mica és la gran pregunta també que quan vam publicar el títol en català alguns periodistes i alguns llibreters ens deien què us agrada a l'escriptora, perquè aquesta novel·la s'ha escrit en primera persona, és com si parlés la Sylvia Plath de l'últim any de vida. De manera que, clar, de què us agrada la Sylvia Plath, sent una gran poetesa, molt reconeguda, com gosava una mica la Elin, realment és un gran repte, intentar escriure aquest últim any. Així que la meva primera pregunta seria saber què és el que et va portar a llançar-te a escriure sobre aquest últim any de vida de la Sylvia Plath, què et va inspirar, o sigui, què és el que et va decidir posar-te a omplir aquest any, que com deia desconeixem perquè el Ted Hughes va cremar els diaris de l'últim any de vida de Sylvia Plath, deia que per protegir els seus fills, suposem que també per protegir-se a ell mateix i tot això d'aquest darrere.
Well, I think I was sort of led by a great force. I really felt that I had a kind of a powerful voice within me that I could use. And I discovered this voice when I sort of created a totally new document in my computer. And I did that when I had just had a dream in the night that I had. In this dream, I dreamt that I had written a novel about Sylvia Plath. So it was actually a dream telling me that this is possible, that yes, you can do it. And I don't think if I wasn't led by this sort of unconsciousness, I don't think I would have dared really to put that big coat on and to step in these really big shoes. And I had also reached the point in my own writing where I had really laid the table already, because I had been writing for some years, you know. That's what you do as a writer, you just write all the time. And in the end, it becomes something really important, you know. And that's why I think where a kind of otherness steps into your writing. Because when you're writing and you feel that your text is numb and that it's not resonating with the world or with you, it's just like it's a language, but the language is numb, you know. It's really horrible to be in that state as a writer. You need your text to come alive, and I think that's what happened really. All of a sudden there was a temper in my text. There was a tone and a musicality and a voice, and I had really no choice but to follow this impulse. And it was a bit overwhelming, but I could really manage to stay focused in this strong and forceful voice. I could still keep focus, and I think that was really, really important. Yeah.
Sorprèn molt a la novel·la és que, si coneixeu Sílvia Plath i heu llegit els seus diaris, heu llegit la seva poesia, Sílvia Plath és molt a dins de cada frase d'aquesta novel·la. O sigui que realment, i aquesta seria una mica la pregunta que li faig a l'Elin, és, bueno, suposo que va haver una gran identificació d'ella amb l'autora, i més, no?, quan aquest llibre està escrit en primera persona. I aleshores, bueno, una mica ens expliqués una mica aquest procés d'escriptura i quan hi ha de l'Elin en aquest llibre i quan hi ha de Sílvia Plath.
Okay, so I think one of the conditions that really was important here was that I felt that I really knew Sylvia Plath in some sense. I mean, as much as you can as an author. And I had that sort of life-changing literary experience, as you may have in your life at some point. And Sylvia Plath was that kind of author to me. And I was 20 years old, and I was traveling with my family in England and Scotland. And I went to York, and this was 2003. So her journals had just been published. So it was just a coincidence, really. I went strolling around York, and some of you may know that she's buried in Yorkshire, and that Ted Hughes is also from the area, from Yorkshire. So it was a feeling of like, this has just happened, and that we are proud of this book, and it was fronted in all the small bookshops around York. And I was walking around, and I saw that book every day. And the last day, I think, I asked my mother, because, you know, the word journals in Swedish, it's very similar to like hospital journals. So it didn't cling to me that, yeah, this is diaries. This is a diary. And I was a diary keeper myself. I have written so much journals in my life. So, and when I asked my mom, what does journals mean? And she was like, well, yeah, diaries, diary writing. And I was like, oh my God, I have to buy this. And of course I had heard about Sylvia Plath at some point, but I had never read her. So I bought the bell jar straight away. I bought the journals, and they were the first like uncensored journals, like the full journals published. And I just read and read. I couldn't, literally, I was walking and reading, and I was walking like on the cobblestones, and it was really like this. But I couldn't stop reading. And to me, she was a voice. She's really sort of maybe the first sort of author who is a young, modern, educated woman, you know, a liberated, like free city cultural woman who is also longing for love, and she's writing about her love and desire, and about her dates that she's going on, and about also like the female experience, really, from a young point of view, a young and very modern point of view. And that really struck me when I was a young woman. And now, when I was an older woman and a mother and also a writer, I could relate to Sylvia Plath once again on an even deeper level, because now I understood what she could have been going through this final year that I'm writing about. So that was really crucial to sort of discover her in my 20s and then rediscover her in my 30s, and to really see what her daily life could have been like. But then you asked me about, maybe you want to translate first? Yeah. Yes, and you asked me about the writing process. And I was just going to say that I was really helped. I mean, personal experience is always a tool that you use as a writer. And you have many tools. You know, you can't rely only on your personal experience. You have to rely on different tools. So I was really immersed in reading Sylvia Plath and rereading and reading the biographies that I could come across, and reading Ted Hughes on a new note, you know, and his letters and her journals all over again. And I sort of mixed this with the personal, really, identification with Sylvia Plath. And I really wanted her to speak, and I had this sort of urge within me, inside me, that I felt that you have to stand up. I had this vision in my mind. The first scene I was writing, it was my sort of pilot. I wrote a scene where Sylvia Plath was lying on the side, and it was all white in the room, and she was dressed in white, and so it was sort of the image of the dead woman, really, because everything was white. And I think the color white was really important, because this last months in her life, it was really cold and snowy in London. And as I started writing, it just happened to be January in Sweden, so it was really cold and icy, and everything was frozen and white. So it was the image of the dead woman. But the thing is, in my vision, she was also pregnant. So I mean, it was the pregnant, the very much alive woman lying there. And I knew she needed to tell her story. So that was my first scene. I really wanted my words to sort of breathe on her. And I wanted her to stand up and really tell her story. What was this like for you? Because, you know, we are just like drowned in stories about how it was for her this final year and what she went through. And I think this last year of her life is so mythologized. I mean, it's a myth around Sylvia Plath and her dying. And I wanted to come, like, to snuggle in, sneak in, and sort of step aside that myth, and to really come closer, because there's so much death, you know, and so much, like, the suicide is all, like, everything, sort of, in the question of Sylvia Plath. So I really wanted to shift focus and shed light on her life, really.
Sí, realment nosaltres, des de la vessant editorial, sí que hem tingut moltes vegades, quan expliquem el llibre o quan hem fet presentacions sobre el llibre o grups de lectura, que molta gent ens diu, aquest llibre serà molt depressiu, no? O sigui, com l'últim, com acaba molt, evidentment, no? Acaba suïcidant-se. I aleshores també ens ha agradat molt aquest enfocament de l'Elin, d'aquest últim any de vida, perquè realment, si alguna cosa és la Sílvia Plath, o si alguna cosa interessa el valor dels seus poemes, és un cant a la vida. Evidentment ella tenia aquests alts i baixos emocionals, tenia depressions, etc, però realment, i penso que aquí a la veu de l'Elin expressa molt bé aquesta eufòria, també acompanyant per al títol, i aquesta passió per la vida, per viure, tot i que acabi d'aquesta manera tan dramàtica, però realment es veu molt i es percep molt tot aquest tema. Penso, i així ens explicarà l'Elin amb més profunditat, però que queda molt ben reflectit a la novel·la, que un dels grans temes d'aquesta novel·la és tota la importància o l'impacte que té en ella la maternitat, per un costat, que sembla un element que la canvia i passa a ser una nova Sílvia Plath, ella mateixa ho diu d'aquesta manera, en un moment o altre, i alhora la necessitat de seguir-se dedicant al seu art, que al final el seu art és el motor de la seva vida. Aleshores, maternitat, creació artística, aquesta dicotomia, realment és un dels elements claus o centrals en la novel·la, que l'Elin ha aprofundit també en ella. Bueno, it's not a question, just to comment, this duality between maternity and artistic, which is central in the novel.
Yeah. Yes, and this was another condition, I think, in my writing, that I knew that I was going to portray a very forceful woman and a very strong voice that was sort of going to be, maybe for the first time, deliberated. Because, I mean, as much as she has written to this point, Ted Hughes has sort of described it as she was now, for the first time, speaking in her own voice. Because this is the thing with Plath, that she wears masks all the time, and she's a performer. She was a very good performer. And if you perform, you can't be loved for the one that you really are. That's one of the saddest insights that I really got in doing all my research and reading her again. If you always play your part very good, it's the part, it's the character that people love and that people listen to. It's not your own true self. And the thing is that I think it's a bit of an irony that Ted Hughes puts it like this, because Sylvia Plath is really, really struggling to be able to have herself put out there in her text. This is really one of the major conflicts in her writing, because she knew as a woman you can never be like the subjective female voice can never be like the universal experience or the universal voice, but the thing with Sylvia Plath is that herself is really universal. It's really, really, it really breathes at you from the side, it's so strong. When she writes me, myself, and I, she's really there, and it's really strong. But I think time wasn't yet, mature for this. They couldn't really, really open, and I don't think it's like that now either. That the female experience can go for any experience, I think I stepped a little bit away from the question, maybe, but anyway, it was a comment, so yeah.
Sí, quan la Elin ja aquí, a Catalunya, habitualment ja passa això, que de vegades, jo no soc entrevistadora, però que no es fan preguntes, es fan comentaris. I aleshores és veritat que això pels estrangers estan acostumats a dir, intentaré fer preguntes a partir d'ara. Doncs l'altre gran tema que hi hauria en aquesta novel·la seria tota aquesta, com deia abans, aquesta dicotomia. Ella vol ser mare, estima els seus fills, els adora, per ella la maternitat l'ha transformat absolutament, però per una altra banda té la gran necessitat d'escriure i dedicar-se al seu art. Això contrasta també amb en Ted Hughes, que ell, més o menys, segueix fent la seva vida, segueix anant, com comentava l'Elin, no estranyament se'n van a viure al camp, no? Quan ells eren molt urbanites, però ell segueix anant a Londres, segueix anant a les seves relacions literàries, segueix anant a recitar poemes a la BBC, i ell en canvi està allà dalt. No? Aleshores, una mica, si ens vols comentar una mica la relació entre ells tots dos, no? Com aquesta relació d'amor-odi entre aquests dos artistes i una mica com es desencadena aquesta relació de parella.
Well, one of the things that I also learned by doing my research was that, how far Sylvia Plath, how far out on the countryside she really was. Because I booked a trip to go to Devon, to go to southern England, and I brought my family with me, which was maybe a little bit, it was a very special trip. But we went there, and I had this feeling of that she was really trapped in a way, you know. And the thing is that Sylvia Plath was really this sort of city girl. She was from Boston, and to live in this house, you know, this is the thing with Plath and Hughes, that they were so sort of ahead of their time, really. And in London, this could fit in, you know, their sort of notion of freedom could really rhyme sort of with London, with the London literary life and the freedom that you have there. But as soon as you move to the countryside, you know, isolation happened, and not so many impulses, you know, and not so many conversations fly into your life. You know, you get really like, and I think for a woman and for a mother, this could be toxic, and I think it really was for Sylvia Plath. And if they had waited a little, things would really have changed for them. And this is so depressing because they live in this house for so short time. They moved there in August 61, I think, and then in May 62, not even a year from there, they have this couple over at dinner, Asha and David Gwiville, and Ted Hughes falls in love with Asha. He falls immediately in love. He's infatuated with her. So things happen really quickly, and it's a cliche, actually, you know. But he followed the cliche. He chose the cliche, and then things started really to fall apart. And the irony of this falling apart thing is that, and this is another thing, actually, I wanted to add. I was just going to say that the irony is that the mother of Plath is coming to witness this summer of 62, to witness their marriage falling apart. But the thing is that Sylvia Plath, I think that Ted Hughes knew in a way that Sylvia Plath was really reaching a point in her career where she could actually write brilliant poems, because she's writing the Ariel poems this final year, and a little bit also in 1963. And she's about to have her debut novel published. It's accepted, the Bell Jar. So, she's reaching somewhere. She's getting somewhere. And I think Ted Hughes is actually panicking because he feels that his career has been sort of sleeping. And he says that, I have been asleep like all our marriage, he says to Sylvia Plath, quite brutally. And his writing has been silent. So I think he feels that, Sylvia is really getting somewhere. She's on the brink to sort of have her success. And I'm not sure, but you could sort of imagine that Ted Hughes deliberately or unconsciously does this to her to sort of sabotage or something. Like, I mean, we are driven by our unconscious, I mean, more than we think. So you could see it that way, you could interpret it like that, yeah.
Sí, bueno, això com comentava la Elin, no? Al final aquest trencament, aquest abandonament, per ella suposa un gran impacte, no? Ella, en la novel·la està molt ben reflectit, ella està boja per ell, o sigui, no només des del punt de vista sexual, o sigui, desitja, el vol, o sigui, és com un... I ha passat a ser també com un suport a la seva vida, no? Un suport emocional. Per ell ho és tot. Hi ha un moment que diu que inclús que els seus desitjos han acabat sent els seus, no? De manera que quan ell la deixa, per ella realment és un gran trencament. No només perquè ell la deixa, sinó perquè també, com dèiem, estem parlant dels anys 60 i allà una dona soltera, una solterona que feia pel món, i més si et volies moure en el món artístic, no? O sigui que per ella realment era com un quedar-se sense un referent, o sigui, quedar-se com sola i aïllada, no? I això també va ser molt dur i molt per ella, no? I penso que en el llibre està molt ben reflectit també tot aquest sentiment. I ja per acabar, l'última pregunta que li faig a l'Elin seria, relacionat amb tot aquest gran tema de maternitat, com ella deia, no? I sabent, i ella també és escriptora i mare, si ella hagués pogut escriure aquest llibre si no hagués estat mare, seria la teva pregunta.
Well, this is a good question. I've never had that question before. Those questions are the best. But actually, I was just talking with Carlota yesterday, my other interpreter, that we both read the latest novel by Joyce Carol Oates called The Babysitter. And it's really a novel about motherhood as well. I mean, it's a novel about murder and very like sexual assault and everything, but yeah, also motherhood actually. And I know that Joyce Carol Oates, she doesn't have children herself, but this is a really strong and powerful text and a portrait of a mother. And I mean, it's Joyce Carol Oates. I mean, she's a master, but she's really it really struck me that that you can really, through literature, you can really step into another sort of state of mind and another body and another sort of world of feelings and images and how to perceive the world in another person, through another person. So yes, my if I'm going to be hopeful in this response, I would say yes. But I mean, in this specific situation, it was really important that I had this sort of like really fresh experience. I was really in it, you know. I was really there as I was writing. I was really sort of still breastfeeding, you know, when I was writing. So it was really important, and it was also important for me to know something about exhaustion, that you can feel as a mother. You can feel that you are sort of a resource of nature in some way, that you're using this resource of nature, both you and your partner, and it happens to be you. I mean, you are the resource of nature. So I had that feeling, this is crazy. Like we're using me in this sense, and someone needs to help me here, you know, that feeling, and that this wasn't, I mean, that I was sort of, it was impossible for me to put this into words. And that was the real urge, you know, to put into words what wasn't there. But having said that, I know that Sylvia Plath has been writing a lot about motherhood and a lot about the female experience, the body experience, and about pregnancy and other female experiences like miscarriage or abortion. And yeah, she's been writing about all this. So yeah, so you should just read her. I think. Yeah.
La Sílvia Plath crec que, no sé si ho diré literalment o no, però deia que la maternitat era el miracle més cruel que hi ha.
Bé, jo crec que xerro en nom de tothom, que tant de bo el rellotge no em pengués i poguéssiu seguir una hora més, perquè m'ha tocat a mi interrompre, perquè crec que no és finalitzar, és interrompre aquesta conversa. Moltíssimes gràcies a totes dues, però sempre acabam amb una pregunta que us he de demanar, que sigui una resposta molt breu gairebé, perquè en aquesta màtria que construïm a la Fundació Mallorca Literària volem anar afegint noms, i gairebé m'apareix ofensiu demanar-lo quan avui heu xerrat de la Sílvia Plath, però tal vegada ens servirà per saber amb qui somia o sobre qui escriurà ara Elin Cullhed. Fins ara, les dones que han passat per aquí han afegit Anne Carson, Cynthia Ausig, Mary Wollstonecraft, Eider Rodríguez, Carla Simón. Per tant, una dona, una escriptora, cineasta, editora, il·lustradora, allò que vulgueu, un nom i llinatge que vulgueu afegir en aquesta llista avui. Si vols començar tu, Maria.
Vale, si començo jo ràpidament. Doncs mira, jo afegiria Rachel Cusk, que és una autora europea, d'origen canadenc, però fa molts anys que viu a Anglaterra, últimament s'ha refugiat a París i realment crec que és una autora que us la recomano moltíssim. La Rachel Cusk el que fa és que analitza la realitat i treu tot el que hi ha de condicionants socials, culturals i mira la realitat directament als ulls, o sigui, fa unes anàlisis molt crues i molt reals de la realitat, i penso que és molt valenta en la mesura que és capaç d'això, de treure com mites o com aquells condicionants que tenim i que no som conscients ni que els tenim, però els que tenim clarament interioritzats per l'herència educativa, cultural i per tot el que ens precedeix.
I aleshores t'han introduït.
Sí, aleshores a més hem publicat 3 títols d'ella, perquè és una de les nostres autores preferides, i realment tenim un sobre el matrimoni, que realment fa una gran dissecció sobre la institució del matrimoni, com la institució que ordena el món occidental, podríem dir-ho així. Un altre que és sobre la invisibilitat de les dones als anys 50, que és l'altra casa, que també és molt rellevant. I l'altre que m'estic oblidant és el de... La feina d'una vida, que és sobre la maternitat. O sigui, realment ella l'any 2000 té un fill i explica com és ser mare, quan en aquell moment estava molt mitificat el fet de ser mare, i ella explica quina és la seva realitat l'any 2000 sent mare, que coincideix molt amb la Sílvia Plath, perquè realment vol seguir sent mare, però vol seguir sent ella i dedicant-se al seu art.
Wonderful. I actually met Rachel Cusk and I was in conversation with her. It was just amazing. I met her in Montpellier. And I really love her writing, so that was interesting. This person has to be alive, or no? Okay, so I mean, naturally, I would like to add Paula Modersohn-Becker, the artist that really played an important role in Euphoria, and this book about her by Marie Dariussek is so good. But also, of course, Emily Dickinson, the poet, the American poet Emily Dickinson, who was also important to Sylvia Plath, of course. I would like to add them, I think. Yeah? Great artists.
Bé, només me queda recordar-vos que la pròxima cita és dia 25 d'octubre a la llibreria Lluna, a Mercè Climent i aquí Capol. Donar-vos les gràcies a totes tres, a Maria, a Elin, i també la superfeina que has fet de traducció avui. I si vos pareix, acabam amb un poema de Sylvia Plath, per exemple, si tenim un moment.
El Colossus, el seu primer llibre, que realment està molt enfocat a tot el que seria la vida, la mort, la resurrecció, tot aquest cicle, que és el que realment focalitza el seu primer llibre. Aquest es titula El jardí de la mansió. S'han assecat les fonts i marcit les roses. Encens de mort. El teu dia s'acosta. Les peres s'engreixen com budes petits. Una boira blava arrossega el llac. Travesses l'era dels peixos, els segles presumits del porc. Cap, dit del peu, de la mà, deixen enrere l'ombra. La història nodreix aquestes columnes trencades, aquestes corones de cant, i el corp s'endreça els vestits. Heretes el bruc àrtic, una ala d'abella, 2 suïcides, els llops familiars, hores de negror. Alguns estels durs ja es grogueixen al cel. En el seu propi fil, l'aranya travessa el llac. Els cucs abandonen les seves estances de sempre. Els ocellets s'apleguen amb obsequis en un néixer difícil.